She walked into my shop in a $2,000 coat while I was deciding which bill to ignore this month. My 4-year-old daughter was dying. The hospital wanted $12,000 by Friday. I had $41,000 in my wallet and a wedding ring I couldn't bring myself to sell. Then this stranger offered me a marriage contract like it was a business deal. 6 months, no feelings. Her money for my silence. I told her to get out. 3 days later, I was signing her papers with my daughter unconscious in my arms. If you make it to the end of this story, drop a like and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you what happened when a rich man's runaway daughter walked into the life of a broken father who had nothing left to lose. The radiator in the workshop had been making a sound like a dying cat for 3 weeks, and Landon Hayes had stopped noticing it the way a man stops noticing his own limp. He was hunched over a walnut dresser, a 1940s piece some woman in Asheville wanted restored for her granddaughter's wedding, and his hands were moving without him. Sand, wipe, check the grain, sand again. The afternoon light came in sideways through the big front window, catching the dust in lazy spirals. And outside, the February wind was doing that thing it did in the foothills of western North Carolina, pushing hard enough to rattle the glass in its frame. He had the space heater aimed at his knees. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. On the workbench, his phone buzzed against a tin of beeswax polish. He glanced at it and looked away. Mercy Regional, 3rd call today. He already knew what they were going to say. He knew because he'd been dodging them for 11 days, and he knew because Dr. Patel had sat him down in the pediatric oncology wing last Thursday with that face doctors wear when they're about to explain something you can't afford. Chloe's numbers were wrong. The treatment plan they'd been working on since October wasn't working fast enough, and the surgical consult they'd been putting off wasn't optional anymore. There was a specialist at Duke. There was a window. There was, as there always was, a number at the bottom of the page, $12,460, up front, before they'd even schedule her in. He set down the sanding block and pressed the heels of his palms against his eyes until he saw red. Dad? Her voice was small, the way it always was now, like someone had turned down the volume on his little girl over the last 18 months and forgotten to turn it back up. Landon dropped his hands and turned around, already smiling before he saw her. Because that was the rule. That was the only rule that mattered. Chloe was standing in the doorway that connected the workshop to the tiny apartment above it, one hand on the frame to hold herself up. She was wearing the pink pajamas with the foxes on them, the ones Marin had bought her the Christmas before she died. And they were too big now. Everything was too big now. Her hair was the color of wheat in August, fine and a little thin on top where the treatment had taken it, and her eyes were her mother's. That unfair, ridiculous green that had made Landon trip over his own feet the first time he saw it across a bar in Raleigh 8 years ago. "Hey, baby." He crossed to her and crouched down, and his knees popped like an old man's. "You're supposed to be taking your nap." I heard the phone. "Yeah, I bet you did. It's real loud, huh? You want some juice?" She nodded, and he picked her up. She weighed nothing. That was the worst part, maybe. Not the hospital visits, or the needles, or the long drives to Winston-Salem, or the insurance calls that went in circles. The worst part was that his daughter weighed nothing. He could feel her shoulder blades through the flannel, 2 little wings, and his throat did that thing it did where it felt like someone had jammed a walnut into it sideways. "How about apple juice with the bendy straw?" he said, carrying her back through the door into the apartment. "The pink straw." "The pink straw, obviously. I don't know what I was thinking." She leaned her head against his neck. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Your beard's scratchy." "That's 'cause I'm a bum." "You're not a bum." "No?" "You're a daddy." He had to stop for a second at the top of the stairs and just breathe, because some days the love was so big it hurt in his chest, like a real physical thing, like something medical, and he didn't know what to do with it except put one foot in front of the other and not let her see. The apartment was 2 rooms and a kitchenette that had been a bathroom before the previous owner decided plumbing was negotiable. There was a couch that had come from his Uncle Ray's garage, a TV that worked if you hit it, and a twin bed in the corner where Chloe slept because she wouldn't sleep in the other room anymore, not since Marin. Landon slept on the couch. He'd been sleeping on the couch for 16 months. He got her settled with the juice and the remote, and an episode of that show with the talking horse, and then he went back downstairs because if he sat still for one more second, he was going to come apart at the seams. The phone buzzed again. He picked it up this time. His hand was shaking a little, and he hated that. Mr. Hayes, this is Danielle at Mercy Regional Billing.
I know, Danielle. I know who it is. I'm going to have it. I just need until the end of the month, okay? I've got a couple pieces going out. There's a woman in Asheville. Mr. Hayes, I understand, but the balance on the account is now past the point where I can hold it. I'm going to have to forward this to collections on Monday unless we see a good faith payment of at least $2,500. He leaned his forehead against the cold workbench. $2,500. Yes, sir. By Monday. Yes, sir? He laughed. He didn't know why. It just came out of him, and it wasn't a laugh anybody would want to hear. All right, Danielle, all right. Thank you for calling. He hung up. He stood there for a while. The radiator kept dying. The wind kept pushing at the window. Outside, a truck went by on Main, and somewhere a dog was barking, and Landon Hayes was 32 years old, and he was going to have to sell his wedding ring. He opened the small drawer under the till, where he kept the things he couldn't throw away. Marin's last grocery list in her loopy handwriting. Eggs, milk, those crackers C likes. A photo of Chloe at 2, covered in spaghetti sauce, grinning like a maniac. His dad's pocket watch from the railroad, the chain missing a link, and the ring in a little velvet box that had gone gray at the edges. He took it out. He held it in his palm. It was warm from the drawer somehow, which didn't make any sense, but it was. The bell above the front door rang. He shoved the ring in his jeans pocket and turned around, and that was when he saw her. The first thing he thought was that she was lost. She was standing just inside the door, letting it swing shut behind her, and she didn't belong. She didn't belong the way a peacock doesn't belong in a chicken coop, not ugly, just wrong in every direction. Her coat was long and pale and looked like it cost more than his truck. Her hair was dark and pulled back in some kind of complicated knot at the base of her neck. She was wearing leather gloves. Leather gloves. In his shop, where the floor had sawdust on it and the window hadn't been washed since Obama, she was maybe 26, 27. Pretty in a way that made you want to look away because you felt like you'd been caught staring at something you couldn't afford. Can I help you? His voice came out rougher than he meant. He cleared his throat. I'm looking for Landon Hayes. She said his name carefully, like she was reading it off a note. Her voice was low and a little raspy, not what he'd expected. You found him. Oh. She seemed surprised. She looked him up and down, the flannel shirt, the sawdust in his beard, the hands, and for a second he saw himself through her eyes and almost smiled. I was told you did restoration work. I do. By a woman in Asheville. Evelyn Marsh? The dresser lady. Yes, she said you were... She used the word honest. That's a low bar. Not where I'm from. He didn't know what to say to that. He wiped his hands on his jeans, out of habit, and waited. She drifted further into the shop. She was taking it in. The tools on the pegboard, the half-finished rocking chair in the corner, the stack of maple planks he'd been saving for a commission that had fallen through in December. She walked carefully, like she was afraid of getting something on her coat. Probably was. I have a piece, she said. A music box. It was my mother's. The mechanism is broken, and the inlay is... There are pieces missing. Bring it in. I'll take a look. It's in the car. Okay? She didn't move. She was looking at the wall behind him, where he'd hung up one of Chloe's drawings. A stick figure man with a beard holding hands with a stick figure girl with a triangle for a dress, and a smaller stick figure with wings floating above them both. Mommy is an angel now, in blocky 4-year-old letters at the bottom. Her face did something. It was quick and she tried to hide it, but he caught it. Something that wasn't pity exactly. Something more private than pity. I'll go get the box, she said. She went out. He watched her through the window as she crossed to a black SUV with tinted windows that was parked at the curb, and he watched a man in a dark suit get out of the driver's seat and open the back for her. A driver. She had a driver, Jesus Christ. She came back in with a small wooden box wrapped in a silk scarf, and she set it on his workbench like it was a bird that might fly away. She unwrapped it slowly. It was burled walnut with mother-of-pearl inlay in a pattern of vines. The lid was cracked along the seam. 2 of the inlay pieces were gone. When she lifted the lid, the little ballerina inside was bent at the waist like someone had stepped on her, and the mechanism gave a dry, strangled click. My mother, she said. Used to wind this every night. He didn't say anything. He ran his finger along the crack. She died when I was 11. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Doesn't matter how long. She looked at him then, really looked at him, for the first time. Her eyes were dark, not brown, something between brown and gray, the color of wet bark, and for a second something passed between them that he couldn't name and didn't want to, because he hadn't looked at a woman like that since Marin, and he wasn't going to start now, not with some rich girl in leather gloves who was probably going to mispronounce his last name on the check. How much? She said. Depends. Couple hundred if I can source the shell. More if I can't. Mechanism's a separate thing. I know a guy in Greensboro. That's fine. That's all fine. I'll need a week, maybe 2. Take as long as you need. She was staring at the drawing again. Your daughter? Yeah. How old? 4.5. She'll tell you the half. A small laugh came out of her, and it surprised them both. What's her name? Chloe. Chloe, she repeated like she was tasting it. Is she here? He hesitated. He didn't know why. Maybe because the question was too direct, or because nobody had asked about Chloe in a way that wasn't medical or pitying in a long time. Maybe because from upstairs, right at that moment, he could hear the thin thread of her voice singing along to the TV. She's upstairs, not feeling great today. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair. Thanks. She paid cash. She paid cash for a repair she hadn't even gotten a quote on yet. $600 in hundreds, fresh from the bank, and she laid them on the workbench without looking at them, the way other people lay down a grocery receipt. He stared at the money. Ma'am, that's too much. Sienna. What? My name. It's Sienna. Sienna Vale. That's too much, Sienna. Then consider it a deposit on the next thing. What next thing? She pulled on her gloves. She was looking at the drawing again. She wasn't looking at him. I don't know yet, she said, but I'll be back. And then she walked out, and the bell rang, and the SUV pulled away, and Landon Hayes was left standing in his shop with $600 in cash on the workbench and no idea what the hell had just happened. He did not spend the $600 on the hospital. He thought about it. God, he thought about it. He stood there for probably 5 minutes just looking at the money. And then he picked it up and put it in the drawer with the ring and the grocery list and the photo, and he locked the drawer and he went upstairs to make his daughter macaroni. Because here was the thing. He didn't take money he hadn't earned. It was the only rule his father had ever given him that had actually stuck. And his father had been a mean drunk who'd taught him mostly by accident. You earn it or you don't touch it, Lanny. A man who takes what he didn't earn is a man who owes what he can't pay. $600 from a stranger for a music box he hadn't fixed yet was somebody else's money. It would be his money when the box was fixed, not before. It was a small, stupid principle. It was going to cost him his daughter's life, probably, if he wasn't careful. He made the macaroni with the real cheese, the kind Chloe liked, and he sat on the floor next to the couch while she ate it and told him about the horse show. The horse was named Gerald. Gerald had a problem with his friends. Chloe was very concerned about Gerald. What kind of problem, Bug? He wants to do the thing, but they want to do the other thing. That's tough. Yeah, she chewed. Gerald should just tell them. You think so? Yeah, you have to tell people. He kissed the top of her head. She smelled like the baby shampoo they still used because the regular stuff hurt her scalp. You're right, Bug. You have to tell people. At 8, she fell asleep halfway through a bite of macaroni, and he carried her to the twin bed and tucked her in and stood there watching her breathe for longer than he should have. Her chest rose, and it fell. It rose, and it fell. And the thing in his own chest, the walnut in his throat, moved around and wouldn't settle. He went downstairs. He did not look at the drawer. He called Mercy Regional's after-hours line and left a message for Danielle saying he'd have $2,500 by Monday. He didn't know how, but he'd have it. He sold the ring the next morning at a pawn shop in Hickory. The guy behind the counter gave him $900 for it. He said it was a nice piece. He said it like he was sorry. Landon didn't cry. He didn't cry in the shop, and he didn't cry in the truck, and he didn't cry on the drive back,
But he pulled over once on the side of Route 64 and sat with his forehead on the steering wheel and breathed in and out for a while. And by the time he got back to the shop, there was dust on his face where his hands had been. And the dust was a little muddy around the eyes, but that was probably just the wind. She came back on a Tuesday. It had been 11 days. He hadn't finished the music box. He was waiting on the shell pieces from a supplier in Pennsylvania. And he was in the middle of arguing with a customer on the phone about a table leg when the bell rang, and there she was. Same coat. No gloves this time. Her hair was down, and it was longer than he'd thought. He held up a finger. She nodded and waited.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that, but if you asked for reclaimed barnwood, then you're going to get checking in the... No, ma'am. That's the wood doing what wood does. It's a feature. Yes, I'll be here tomorrow. All right, bye now. He hung up. He pressed the heels of his hands into the workbench. Tough customer, Sienna said. She wants wood that isn't wood. Ah, how can I help you? I came to see the music box. It's not done. I'm waiting on...
I know. Evelyn Marsh told me you'd said 2 weeks. It's been 11 days. You've been counting. I've been counting. He looked at her. Something in her face was different today, tighter. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her mouth was doing this thing where the corners pulled down like she was holding something in her teeth. You okay? I'm fine. You don't look fine. I said I'm fine. He held up his hands. All right. She stood there. She seemed to be building up to something, and he'd seen that look before on people who came into his shop. People who walked in pretending they wanted a table and really wanted to tell him something else. The old man who'd come in last fall and wept for 40 minutes about his wife's china cabinet. The woman who'd brought in her dead son's desk. Furniture was what people brought you when they didn't have the words for the rest of it. He waited. Mr. Hayes? Landon, I need to ask you something, and I'd like you to hear me out before you say no. Okay. Can we sit down? He had 2 stools. He pulled them around so they were facing each other near the radiator, and he sat. She sat. She crossed her legs and uncrossed them again. Her hands were very still in her lap, but he could see a muscle jumping in her jaw. I've done my research, she said, about you, about your situation. I hope you'll forgive me for that. Research? Yes. On me? Yes. He felt the first prick of something cold at the back of his neck. What kind of research? Your wife died 16 months ago. A car accident on Route 221, a drunk driver, not her fault. You've been raising your daughter alone. Your daughter has a form of pediatric, it's a blood thing, I'm not going to pretend I understand it, but I understand that she needs surgery that your insurance won't fully cover, and the bill is in 5 figures, and you have, as of Monday morning, $1,342 in your checking account. He stood up. Get out. Landon, please, get out of my shop. I have a proposal. I don't want your proposal. I don't want your money. I don't know how the hell you got into my bank account, but you can. I didn't get into your bank account. I had someone look at your situation the way anyone with enough money can have anyone's situation looked at, which is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm telling you that this is how my world works, and I hate it, and I'm offering you a way to use it. A way to use it. Yes. For what? She took a breath. Her hands had stopped being still. A marriage. The shop went very quiet. Even the radiator seemed to pause. What? A marriage. On paper. 6 months. 12 at most. I transfer funds to cover your daughter's surgery and your outstanding debts immediately. I live somewhere else or here or wherever is easiest. It doesn't matter. At the end of the arrangement, we divorce quietly, and you keep what's left of what I've given you, with a settlement that will cover Chloe's medical needs for... Stop. He'd said it too loud. From upstairs, a thin voice. Dad? Just a minute, Bug, he called up. He turned back to Sienna. His hands were shaking, not in the way they'd shaken with Danielle on the phone, in a new way. He could hear his own heart in his ears. You came in here, he said very quietly, and you saw my daughter's drawing on the wall, and you went home and you did research on me, and you came back here to offer me money to marry you. Yes. My wife has been dead for 16 months. I know. My daughter is upstairs. I know. Get out. Get out of my shop. Get in your car and tell your driver to drive and don't come back here. Do you understand me? I don't care about the music box. Take it. Take all of it. Take the $600. It's in the drawer. Just get out. She stood up. She was very pale. I'm sorry, she said. I did this badly. I didn't mean out. She went to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. My father, she said, and her voice was smaller now, is trying to marry me off by June to the son of a man who owns a shipping conglomerate. I don't know him. I've met him twice. He has a laugh like a seal. I was looking for a way out, and I thought if I could find someone who needed something as badly as I needed something. I said out. She flinched. She opened the door. The bell rang, and then she was gone. He stood in the middle of his shop with the space heater humming and the radiator dying and the February light going thin in the window, and he realized his hands were shaking so hard he couldn't have held a chisel if his life depended on it. He didn't tell Chloe about it. Of course he didn't. He made her dinner, real chicken tonight, because he'd bought it with some of the ring money, and they watched Gerald the horse together, and she told him a long, complicated story about a girl at daycare named Bethany who had opinions about glitter, and he laughed in the right places. And after she was in bed, he went down to the shop, and he sat on the stool where Sienna Vale had sat, and he put his face in his hands. 6 months. 12 at most. Chloe's surgery was $12,460, plus recovery, plus follow-up, plus the specialist who would need to see her every 3 months for the next 2 years, at $300 a visit that the insurance wouldn't cover, because the specialist was out of network, because the only specialist who did this particular procedure in this particular way was out of network, because of course he was. He thought about his father's voice. You earn it or you don't touch it. He thought about his mother, the year before she died, sitting at the kitchen table with the electric bill in her hand and that look on her face, the look that said, I can't do this again. And his father in the next room drinking a Miller High Life and pretending not to notice. He thought about Maureen, the last thing Marin had said to him on the phone that morning, before she got in the car, before the drunk driver. Pick up butter. I love you. Drive careful. In that order, butter first. He thought about the drawing on the wall. Mommy is an angel now. He didn't sleep that night. He went upstairs around 2 and he lay on the couch and he watched the ceiling go slowly gray with dawn. And in his head, he was making a list of all the ways a man could sell his pride for his daughter, and which ones let him look at himself in the mirror afterward. None of them did. That was the honest answer. None of them did. But there was a difference between not being able to look at yourself in the mirror and not being able to bury your child.
Abol simbate is sisot.
On Thursday, Chloe collapsed. It was the middle of the afternoon. She'd been fine, tired, but fine, sitting on the floor of the workshop with a little pile of wood scraps he'd given her to play with, making what she called a house for the spiders. She'd been humming. He remembered her humming. He remembered the song, too, because she was always humming the same one now, the lullaby Marin used to sing, the one about the moon and the boat. And then she stopped humming, and she said, Dad, my tummy feels weird. And then she fell sideways off the little stool he'd made her, and her head hit the floor with a sound he was going to hear for the rest of his life. He didn't remember the drive to Mercy Regional. He remembered carrying her to the truck. He remembered she was limp and very hot, and her lips were a color lips should not be. He remembered yelling at a red light. He remembered the intake nurse's face when she saw Chloe, and the way her face went smooth and professional, the way nurses' faces go when they don't want you to see what they're thinking. They took her from his arms. He stood in the waiting room for an hour and 40 minutes. He didn't sit down once. His phone was in his pocket, and he was very aware of it, the way you're aware of a gun in your pocket, a loaded thing. At 5:12, Dr. Patel came out. Her face was tired. She's stable. He let out a breath that felt like it had been in him for a year. But Landon, we have to move up the surgery. This was a seizure. Her platelet counts are... I'm going to be honest with you. We're out of time. I need you to come into my office on Monday morning, and we need to talk about what we're doing, because what we're doing isn't working. Okay? We need the deposit for Duke on Monday if we're going to get her in before the end of the month. Okay? Landon. I heard you. She put her hand on his arm. She was a small woman. Her hand was very warm. I know, she said. I know. He sat with Chloe until she woke up. She was in a hospital bed that made her look even smaller than she was. There were tubes. There was a machine that beeped. She opened her eyes and she saw him, and she said, "Dad, did I fall?" "You fell, Bug." "On my house for the spiders?" "No, baby. The spider house is fine." "Okay." She closed her eyes. "I'm sleepy." "Sleep then."
Are you going to be here?
"I'm going to be here."
Okay. She slept. He sat in the plastic chair next to the bed, and he took out his phone and he scrolled through his recent calls until he found the number. She'd called from it once to check on the music box. Unknown name, North Carolina area code. He stared at it for a long time. Then he called it. She picked up on the second ring. "Landon." Her voice was cautious, not surprised, cautious. He couldn't get the words out for a second. He looked at his daughter in the hospital bed. He looked at the IV in her tiny arm. He looked at the purple circle under her eye where she had hit the floor. "Where and when?" he said. A long pause. "What?" "Your arrangement. Where do we sign, and when?" Another pause. He could hear her breathing. "Landon, I don't want to talk. I don't want to hear you apologize or explain or tell me what your father said. I want to know where to sign and when, that's all. That's all I'm asking." "Tomorrow. There's an attorney in Charlotte. I can have a car. No car. I'll drive myself. Tomorrow at 10. I'll text you the address." "Okay." "Landon, don't." "I wasn't going to. I was just going to say thank you." He laughed, once, the same laugh that had come out of him on the phone with Danielle. There wasn't any humor in it at all. "Don't thank me," he said. "You haven't done anything yet." He hung up. In the bed, his daughter turned over in her sleep and made a small sound, and he reached out and put his hand on her back. Very lightly, so she would know, even sleeping, even somewhere deep down in her bones, that her father was there, and that her father was not going anywhere, and that her father, whatever else he had to become to keep her, was going to keep her. The machine beeped. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside the window, the February dark pressed up against the glass, and somewhere in the building a woman was crying, and somewhere else a baby was new, and Landon Hayes sat with his 4-year-old daughter in a hospital bed and understood, finally and completely, that a man will do anything. A man will do absolutely anything. The phone buzzed in his hand. Address attached, 10 a.m. "I'm sorry." He looked at it. He didn't answer. He sat in the plastic chair and he watched his daughter breathe. And at some point, without meaning to, he slept. And when he dreamed of Marin. And in the dream, she was standing in the doorway of the workshop in her yellow sundress. And she was saying something to him, and he couldn't hear her. He could never hear her, but she didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She was just looking at him, the way she used to look at him when he came home late from a job, tired and covered in sawdust, and she'd be sitting on the porch with a beer in each hand, and she'd hold one out, and she'd say without saying anything at all, "I know, come here, I know." He woke to the sound of a cartwheel squeaking in the hallway, and for a full 3 seconds he didn't know where he was. Then he saw the IV line. Then he saw the little hand curled on top of the blanket, the nails bitten short because she chewed them when she was nervous, the purple bruise blooming on her temple from the fall. He remembered everything at once, the way you remember a tooth is missing when you run your tongue over the gap. He sat up. His back was a single continuous ache from the plastic chair, and his neck did something audible when he turned his head. It was 6:40 in the morning. The hospital was doing its early shuffle, nurses in soft shoes, somebody laughing too loud at the desk down the hall, the smell of industrial coffee coming from somewhere. He looked at Chloe. She was still asleep. Her breathing was even. The purple under her eye had spread a little overnight. He smoothed the hair back from her forehead. She mumbled something and rolled toward his hand. "Hey, Bug." I gotta go home for a couple hours. I'm gonna come right back. Grandma Ruth is gonna sit with you, okay? She's gonna bring the book with the rabbits. The white one. The white one. Yeah." Her eyes didn't open. "Okay." He kissed her forehead where the bruise wasn't, and he stood up, and his knees told him about it. Ruth, Marin's mother,
who lived in a double-wide outside Marion and who had been the only thing holding him together since the funeral, had already texted that she was on the way. She would be there by 8, which gave him 2 hours to drive home, shower, find a shirt that didn't have sawdust ground into the collar, and drive to Charlotte to sign his life over to a stranger. He stopped at the door and looked back. His daughter was a small shape under too much blanket. She looked, for a second, like something on a shelf in a hospital gift shop, a doll of a girl. Not a real one. He pulled the door shut behind him very carefully, like it might break. The drive back to the shop was a blur. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't roll the window down. He did the thing he'd been doing for 16 months, which was keep his eyes on the yellow line and not think about anything that wasn't the next mile. At home, he stood under the shower until the water went cold. He shaved, and his hand was steady by the end of it, which surprised him. In the bedroom he hadn't slept in since Marin died, he found the one good shirt he owned, a gray button-down she'd bought him for Easter 3 years ago, still in the dry cleaner's plastic, and a pair of khakis that were a size too big now. He put them on. He looked at himself in the mirror over the dresser, and a man he didn't quite recognize looked back. The man in the mirror was 32 and looked 45. His eyes were set deeper than they used to be. His beard had more gray in it than it had any right to. His wedding ring was gone. "All right," he said to the man in the mirror. "All right." He got in the truck. He drove to Charlotte. Chut. The attorney's office was on the 22nd floor of a glass building downtown, and the receptionist looked up from her computer when he walked in, and he watched her do the math on him in about half a second. The boots, the 2 big khakis, the hands, which no amount of washing ever really got clean. He saw her decide he was in the wrong place, and then he saw her decide he wasn't, because the eye contact he gave her was the eye contact of a man who knew exactly where he was and didn't particularly want to be there. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yeah." "They're ready for you. Down the hall, second door on the left." "Thanks." He walked down a hallway with carpet so thick it ate his footsteps. The second door was open. Inside was a conference room with a view of the city and a long table of something expensive that wasn't quite wood, and at the far end of the table sat Sienna Vale and a man in glasses who was her attorney apparently, and a stack of papers that was thicker than any contract had any business being. Sienna stood up when he came in. She was wearing a cream sweater and dark pants. No coat, no gloves. Her hair was down. She looked like she hadn't slept, and she looked like she knew she looked like she hadn't slept. "Landon, let's get this done." The attorney stood up too and put out a hand. "Mr. Hayes, Peter Arkwright. I represent Ms. Vale. My colleague, Ms. Lim, is going to be representing your interests today. She's in the adjoining office. We thought it was important you have independent counsel." "I don't need—" "You need," Arkwright said gently. "Trust me on that one." Ms. Lim turned out to be a small, unsmiling woman in her 50s who walked him through the papers one at a time in a separate room. She explained the language. She explained what he was signing and what he wasn't. She explained the timeline, 6 months minimum, renewable by mutual agreement up to 12, dissolved by default at 18 if not renewed. She explained the fund's disbursement schedule. The first transfer, $85,000, would clear by end of business Monday. That would cover Chloe's surgery, her outstanding hospital balance, the specialist's retainer, and 6 months of living expenses. $85,000. He made her say the number twice. "And this is yours. Upon signature, it is not a loan. It is not contingent on the success of the arrangement. Miss Vale has been very specific on this point." "Why?" Miss Lim took her glasses off and folded them. "Mr. Hayes, it's not my business to speculate on my opposing counsel's client's motivations. But for what it's worth, I have been doing this for 27 years and I have seen a lot of arrangements like this one. Most of them are bad. This one is structured unusually carefully to protect you. That tells me something about the person on the other side. It doesn't tell me what to do. That's your decision. I'm just telling you what I see." He looked at the papers. "If I sign this," he said, "am I her husband?" "Legally, yes." "That's not what I meant." She put her glasses back on. "I know what you meant. I can't answer that question for you." He signed. He signed, and then he signed again on the next page, and again on the page after that, and somewhere around the 11th signature, he stopped feeling his hand. When he was done, Ms. Lim gathered the papers and stood up and said she would see him back in the conference room in 10 minutes, and left him alone. He sat there. He looked at his hands. They were shaking again. Not a lot, just a little. He thought about Marin. He tried very hard not to think about Marin, but he thought about Marin anyway, and he thought about how she would have laughed at this whole situation, the big expensive building, and the attorney with the 2 last names, and the stranger with the cream sweater, and the $85,000. How Marin would have laughed, and then she would have looked at him and said, "Lanny, do what you gotta do. Come home after." Marin had never once in 7 years of knowing her asked him to be a better man than he was. She had only ever asked him to be the one he already was. A little harder. He got up. He walked back to the conference room. Sienna was still at the long table. Arkwright was gone. It was just her and the view and the stack of papers waiting for his second wave of signatures, and she looked at him like she was expecting him to turn around and leave. He didn't. He sat down across from her. He picked up the pen. "Landon, let's just do it. Can I say one thing first?" "No." She opened her mouth. She closed it. She nodded, and she slid the papers over. He signed. She signed. The whole thing took maybe 9 minutes. When it was done, she pushed a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" "The first transfer takes until Monday morning. That's a cashier's check for $6,000, in case you need it before then." "The hospital." He stared at it. He didn't pick it up. "Landon, please, don't be stubborn about this. Everything's already done. It's done. Just take it." He picked it up. He put it in his shirt pocket without looking at it. "When do you want to move in?" She blinked. I'd assumed we'd have a separate conversation about logistics. I'm asking now." Tonight. Is tonight too soon? I have a hotel, but my father's people are... Look, the sooner this is visibly in place, the sooner... Tonight's fine." "Okay. You're going to need to bring your own bed." "What?" "I only got the couch and the twin. Chloe has the twin. I sleep on the couch." A color came into her face that he hadn't seen before. I'll get a hotel until... "No. If we're doing this, we're doing this. You're in the apartment. We can rearrange. I can move the couch. There's the other room, the one I don't go into. I'll clear it out today." He heard himself say it. He heard himself say the one I don't go into, and he watched her face, and he watched her understand, and he saw her decide not to say anything about it, which was maybe the first thing she'd done since she walked into his shop 11 days ago that made him think she was not just a rich girl in expensive gloves. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." He stood up. "Landon, I got to get back to the hospital." "How is she?" He stopped. His hand was on the doorframe. "She had a seizure yesterday." "Oh." "Surgery's getting moved up. Dr. Patel wants to do it in the next 2 weeks if she can get Chloe into Duke." "Whatever it costs." "I know. That's what I'm signing for, isn't it?" He didn't mean it to come out the way it came out. He saw it hit her. He saw her absorb it. She looked at the papers on the table and she said very low, "Yes, that's what you're signing for." "Sienna." She looked up. He didn't know what he wanted to say. He stood in the doorway with his hand on the frame, and he had 1,000 things in his head, and none of them would come out, so he said the only one that felt true. "Don't think less of me for this." Her eyes got shiny, and she looked away fast. "I don't," she said. "I don't think less of you. I think less of me." He left. He got back to the hospital at 12:40. Ruth was in the chair next to Chloe's bed with the White Rabbit book open in her lap, reading out loud in that slow, unhurried way she had. And Chloe was awake and eating pink gelatin off a spoon and laughing at something the rabbit had done. Ruth looked up when he came in. She looked at his shirt. She looked at his shaved face. She didn't say anything for a second. "Grandma said my bruise looks like a plum," Chloe said. "She's right. She says plums are the best kind of fruit." "She's wrong about that." "Dad, oranges are the best kind of fruit and everybody knows it." "Dad." Ruth stood up. She was a compact woman with a long gray braid and hands that had raised 4 kids and a bad husband, and she didn't waste motion. She nodded at him and said, "Walk me out a second, Lanny." In the hallway, she stopped under a fluorescent light that made her look 10 years older than she was. She folded her arms. "You look like a man who just signed something." "I did." Tell me. He told her. The whole thing. The music box, the shop, the offer, the refusal, the seizure, the phone call, the cream sweater in the conference room and the $85,000 and the cashier's check in his pocket. He told her in the flat voice of a man giving a statement, because if he let any feeling into it, he wasn't going to be able to say it at all. Ruth listened. She didn't interrupt. When he was done, she took a breath in through her nose and let it out slow. Lanny, go on, say it. I'm not going to say it. Say it anyway.
No, honey, I'm not.
She put her hand flat on his chest over the shirt pocket with the cashier's check in it. I'm going to say something else. You listen to me. Marin is not in that envelope. Marin is not in that contract. You understand me? Marin is buried out at Oakland Heights, and she is not keeping score of what you do to keep her daughter alive. Don't you ever talk yourself into thinking she is. He looked at the ceiling. Ruth, and this girl. Ruth's voice sharpened. This veiled girl. You be careful with her, you hear me. Not careful the way a man is careful of a woman he can't afford. Careful the way a man is careful of a woman who's running from something. You don't know what she's running from. You don't know what it's going to do when it catches up to her. And it's going to catch up to her, Lanny. It always does. I know. Do you? Yeah, I know. She patted his chest twice and dropped her hand. All right, all right. You need anything from me, you call. I'll bring soup on Sunday. The good kind. Don't let the girl do nothing with the kitchen. God knows what rich people put in soup. Ruth. What? Thank you. She walked down the hall. She didn't look back. She was crying a little. He could tell from the set of her shoulders. But she wasn't about to let him see it, and so he let her have that, and he went back into Chloe's room, and he sat on the bed next to his daughter, and he ate pink gelatin off a spoon with her until she fell asleep. Sienna arrived at the shop at 7 that night. She came in a different car this time, a small silver sedan, not the SUV, and she was driving it herself. She parked at the curb and got out, and she was wearing jeans and a gray Henley and tennis shoes, and Landon, standing at the window with the curtain pulled back, almost didn't recognize her. She looked like a person. She looked, he thought meanly, like she'd dressed down on purpose. And then he thought that was unfair of him. And then he thought he didn't care about being fair tonight. She had one suitcase. One. He'd expected a moving truck. He opened the door before she could knock. That's all you brought. The rest is coming tomorrow. I didn't want to show up with a lot of... I thought it would be easier this way. Easier for who? She didn't answer that. He stepped aside. She came in. She stopped just inside the shop and looked around, and he realized it was the first time she'd really looked at it. The pegboard of tools, the half-finished pieces, the drawing on the wall. She stood there for a second. Chloe's at the hospital? Overnight. They're keeping her on fluids through tomorrow. I go back in the morning. You should be sleeping there. Ruth's there, her grandmother. I'll go back tonight after... He gestured vaguely. After getting you settled. Landon, you don't have to get me settled. I'm getting you settled. She closed her mouth. He carried her suitcase upstairs. He was very conscious, going up the narrow stairs ahead of her, of how the apartment was going to look to her. The couch with the pillow and the blanket still on it from last night. The sink with 2 dishes in it. The refrigerator humming too loud because the motor was going. The drawing of Marion as an angel on the apartment wall too, not just the one downstairs. He hadn't thought about that until now. It was too late to do anything about it. He set her suitcase down in the middle of the living room. Okay, so kitchenette, bathroom through there. That's Chloe's bed, and he pointed at a closed door. That's the bedroom. I'll clear it out tonight. You can have it. I'll sleep out here. Landon. What? You have been sleeping out here. Yeah. For how long? He didn't want to answer, but she'd asked, and he wasn't going to lie. 16 months. She looked at the closed door. She looked at the couch. She looked at him. No. No what? No. I'm not going to walk in here and take the room you haven't been able to go in for 16 months. I'll sleep on the couch. You're not sleeping on the couch. Why not? Because you're... He stopped. Because you're paying for my daughter's surgery. He couldn't say that. He couldn't say it out loud. Because you're the guest. I'm not the guest. I'm Landon. I signed the papers too. Whatever I am, I'm not the guest. They stood there.
He wanted very badly to go downstairs and stand in his shop and sand something, any piece of wood, any surface at all, until his hands remembered what they were for and his head stopped doing whatever it was doing. But he didn't. "All right," he said. "Tonight. Tonight you take the couch. Tomorrow I'll clear the room out. We'll figure it out. I don't want to talk about this anymore tonight." "Okay." There's towels in the bathroom. The hot water runs out after about 7 minutes. The burner on the left is the only one that works right. The fridge there's milk and there's some chicken. Help yourself. "Thank you." "I'm going to go back to the hospital. I'll be home in the morning." "Landon." "Yeah. For what it's worth." "What?" "I didn't do this to you for fun. I know how it looks. I know how I look. I'm not trying to play house. I don't want you to think, I don't think anything." "Okay. Good night, Sienna." "Good night." He was halfway down the stairs when she said his name again. He stopped. "There's one thing." "What?" She was standing at the top of the stairs, and she was holding onto the banister the way Chloe held onto the doorframe, like she needed it to stay up. "I didn't tell my father about this. About you. I didn't tell him. He'll find out. It'll take him a few days, a week, maybe. And when he finds out," she swallowed, "I just want you to know, he's going to come at you. He's going to come at you hard. And I'm sorry in advance." "What's he going to do?" "I don't know. He's never been this angry at me before. I don't know what he does when he's this angry. I've always done what he wanted before."
Well, Landon looked up at her from the stairs. "I guess we'll find out." He went down. He got in the truck. He drove back to the hospital. Ruth had already gone home. The night nurse said Chloe had been asleep for an hour. He sat in the plastic chair and he watched his daughter breathe. And he did not think about the woman he had left in his apartment. He did not think about the closed door of the bedroom he hadn't been able to walk into in 16 months. He did not think about Marin's sundresses still hanging in that closet, or the book she'd been reading on her nightstand with the bookmarks still in it at page 247, or the pillow that still, and probably, insanely, 16 months later, smelled faintly like her when he pressed his face into it and didn't breathe. He didn't think about any of it. He watched his daughter breathe. He fell asleep in the chair. He woke with a crick in his neck and a woman's voice in the hall, not a nurse. The pitch was different. He blinked. He sat up, he rubbed his face, and he stood and went to the door and opened it a crack. And there, at the nurse's station, was Sienna Vale, in the same jeans and Henley, her hair in a ponytail. She was holding a paper coffee cup in each hand and a brown bag from the bakery down the street, and she was talking quietly to the night-charge nurse, and the charge nurse was nodding and laughing a little, and Sienna was laughing too. She saw him over the nurse's shoulder. She stopped laughing. "Hey," she said. "What are you doing here?" "I brought you coffee." And a scone. There's a blueberry and a cranberry. I didn't know which one." He didn't know what to say. He stood in the doorway in his rumpled gray shirt with yesterday's clothes still on and a crease in his cheek from the plastic chair, and he stared at her holding the coffee, and something in his chest did a thing he was not prepared for and did not like. "You didn't have to." "I know." "Sienna, I'm not staying. I'm just dropping this off. I'll go." "You drove all the way here to drop off coffee." "Yeah." "It's 7 in the morning." "Yeah."
"You didn't sleep." "Not really." He rubbed his face again. His hands smelled like hospital. "Come in," he said. Just for a minute. She should meet you. Landon, I don't think that's... She doesn't know me. I don't want to... She doesn't have to know anything. You're a friend who brought me coffee. Come on." She came in. Chloe was awake. She was sitting up, cross-legged on the bed, with the rabbit book propped on her knees, and she was mouthing the words to herself because she couldn't quite read yet, but she knew the story by heart, and she looked up when the door opened and her face did that thing it did. That little inward squint she'd inherited from Marin, the assessing look, the one that said, "I'm deciding about you right now." "Bug, this is my friend Sienna. She brought me coffee." "Hi," said Chloe. "Hi," said Sienna. "You have pretty hair." "Thank you." My hair came out. I can see that. It's coming back, though. Dad says it's going to come back curly. Do you think it'll come back curly? Sienna, still standing in the doorway with the coffees in her hands, looked like someone had hit her softly with a pillow. She didn't move for a second. Then she came a step closer. She set the coffees down on the rolling tray table. She crouched down by the bed, which put her at Chloe's eye level. I don't know, she said, but curly would be good. Curly hair is the best kind. My mom had curly hair. Where's your mom? She died. Mine too. I know. Was yours nice? Yeah. Mine too. Sienna's mouth did a small, brave thing. She said, I bet yours was the nicest. She was, Chloe said, and looked down at her rabbit book, and turned a page and said, very businesslike, This rabbit is named Jemima. She is the best one. Sienna glanced up at Landon. He was standing with his back against the wall and his arms crossed, and something doing a complicated thing behind his ribs, and he was not going to be the one to speak first. He was not. Is Jemima the brave one? Sienna said. No, Jemima is the one who gets lost. Daddy, which one is the brave one? Peter's the brave one, Landon said. But Peter's also kind of dumb. Dad says you can be brave and dumb. Your dad's right. He's usually right. I bet he is. Chloe looked up from the book. She looked at Sienna with that inward squint again for a long second, and then she reached out and very solemnly patted Sienna's hand with her own small hand, the one with the IV tape on the back. You can read Jemima with me if you want, she said. Sienna's face did something Landon had not seen on it before. Something raw and unguarded, the way a face looked when it had forgotten to arrange itself. She sat down on the edge of the hospital bed, very carefully, like she was afraid of jostling the IV, and she took the book, and she began to read out loud. Her voice was low and even, and she did different voices for the rabbits. She was, it turned out, good at different voices. The mother rabbit was scolding. The father rabbit was worried. Jemima herself had a small, breathy voice, full of wonder, that made Chloe grin. Landon stood against the wall and watched. After a while, Chloe leaned against Sienna's arm and closed her eyes, not asleep, just listening. And Sienna kept reading, and she didn't look up at Landon, and Landon didn't look at her. He looked at the IV drip. He looked at the window. He looked at his own scuffed boots on the linoleum. He had made a deal with himself, in the truck on the drive back from Charlotte, that he was not going to let this woman into his life. Not really. She was a transaction. She had signed a paper, and he had signed a paper, and in 6 months or 12 they were going to sign more papers, and it was going to end, and his daughter was going to be alive, and he was going to go back to being what he was, which was a widower in a workshop with a radiator that was dying. That was the deal. He had made it in the truck. He watched her read to his daughter. He thought, I am in trouble. I am in a lot of trouble. She stayed through the morning. She didn't make a big thing of it. When Chloe fell asleep after the rabbit book, Sienna carefully got up and moved to the chair in the corner, and she pulled out a paperback from her bag and read. And when Dr. Patel came in at 9:30, Sienna stood up politely and introduced herself as a friend, and Dr. Patel looked between her and Landon and seemed to decide not to ask, and pulled Landon into the hallway. So, Duke can take her Tuesday. Tuesday? This coming Tuesday. This coming Tuesday. They had a cancellation. I called in a favor. Okay. The deposit clears today. Yes, it's covered. She peered at him. Something happened I should know about. I came into some money. Okay. She looked at him a second longer. Okay, Landon? All right, listen. We need her in the car Monday afternoon. I want her at Duke Monday evening. Pre-op is Tuesday morning. Surgery is Tuesday afternoon. You need to be ready for 3 to 5 days there. You need somebody with you. You can't do this alone, do you hear me? I hear you. I'm serious. I hear you. Is the friend in there going to be the somebody? He looked at Dr. Patel. Dr. Patel was not a sentimental woman. She had told him about Chloe's diagnosis 18 months ago with her hand flat on the desk and her voice level, and she had never pretended to know things she didn't know, and he trusted her more than he trusted most people. I don't know, he said. All right. Figure it out. Ruth? Ruth's got her hip. Somebody. Dr. Patel patted him on the shoulder.
She's going to get through this, Landon. I know you don't want to hear it until it's done. But she's going to get through this. She walked away. He stood in the hallway a minute. Then he went back in. Sienna was back on the bed, gentle and still, with Chloe half draped across her. Chloe had the IV arm tucked against her chest, and her other hand curled into the hem of Sienna's Henley. Asleep, small and warm and breathing. Sienna looked up. She had tears on her face. She wasn't making any sound. She had tears on her face the way a window has rain on it, quietly, without the person behind the window doing anything about it. He came over and he sat down on the bed on Chloe's other side, and the three of them sat like that for a long time, not saying anything, not moving. "Tuesday," he said finally. "Tuesday? Surgery, Duke. We leave Monday afternoon." She wiped her face on her shoulder. "Okay. I'm going to need... Dr. Patel wants somebody with me. Ruth's out, her hip's bad. It'll be 3 to 5 days." She was quiet. "I'm asking," he said. "I don't want to ask, but I'm asking." "Landon." "Yeah." "Yes." "Okay." "Yes." "Of course." "Okay." He looked at his daughter. He looked at Sienna Vale's hand resting on his daughter's back. It was a hand with nice nails on it. It was also a hand that had turned the pages of a rabbit book and done different voices for Peter and Jemima. And it was a hand that had, last night, carried a single suitcase up a narrow staircase in a furniture workshop in a small town in the foothills of western North Carolina, which was not a place a hand like hers had ever expected to end up. He did not think about this for long. He couldn't afford to. The next 3 days were a blur. He signed Chloe out Saturday morning. Sienna drove behind him back to the shop in the silver sedan. At the apartment, she made herself useful in small, careful ways. Not pushy, not performative, just there. She washed the dishes in the sink. She went to the grocery store with a list Landon had written out for her on the back of an envelope and came back with exactly what was on the list and nothing else, and put it all away in the right places like a person who had been paying attention when he opened cabinets around her. She did not touch the bedroom door. She slept on the couch. On Sunday morning, he cleared out the bedroom. He did it while Chloe was still sleeping. He did it while Sienna was downstairs pretending not to pay attention. He opened the door for the first time in 16 months, and he stood in the doorway of his dead wife's bedroom, and the smell of her hit him harder than a bottle to the face. And he sat down on the edge of their bed, and he cried for 10 minutes with his forehead on his knee, and then he got up, and he started packing her things into boxes. The sundresses, the books, the little ceramic bird from her grandmother, the bookmark at page 247, the hairbrush with a few strands of her dark hair still in the bristles. He put them all in boxes. He labeled the boxes with a Sharpie in block letters, the way he labeled everything in his shop. Marin, just that. Sienna came up around 10. She stopped in the doorway. She didn't come in. "Can I help?" "No." "Landon?" "No." "Okay." She stood there a second. "I'm going to take Chloe for a little walk outside. Just the sidewalk in front of the shop. Is that all right?" "Yeah." "We'll come back when you want us to." "Yeah." She left. He finished packing. He carried the boxes down to the shop and he stacked them in the back corner by the maple planks, and he covered them with a drop cloth, and he stood there looking at the shape of them under the cloth, and then he went back upstairs and he stripped the bed, and he washed the sheets, and he remade the bed with the clean ones, and he wiped down the dresser and the nightstand. And he opened the window even though it was February, and the cold came rushing in like a thing with teeth, and he let the room air out for an hour while he sat on the bare floor of Chloe's bedroom and listened to his daughter's laughter coming up faintly from the sidewalk outside, and underneath it, quieter, Sienna Vale's voice, doing a low animated narration of something, making his daughter giggle. When they came back in, Chloe's cheeks were pink, and her eyes were bright, and she said, "Daddy, Sienna says when I'm better, we can go to the aquarium." "She says that, huh?" "In Charleston. It has a sea turtle." "That's a long drive, Bug." "Sienna says we can stop at a pancake place." "Sienna's got opinions about pancakes. A lot of opinions." Behind her, Sienna was very carefully not looking at him. "All right," Landon said. "All right, sea turtle, pancake place. We'll see." Chloe threw her arms around his knees. He put his hand on the top of her head. He looked over her at the woman who had, without permission, without asking, without any right in the world, made his daughter a promise about a sea turtle. He didn't say anything about it. He couldn't figure out what he would have said. Oh, they left for Durham on Monday afternoon. He drove. Sienna sat in the passenger seat with Chloe's small hand hanging backward over the armrest, holding on to Sienna's thumb. Chloe was asleep within 10 miles. The mountains turned to hills, turned to the long, flat grayness of the Piedmont, and Landon drove and Sienna looked out the window, and neither of them said much. At a gas station in Statesville, she got out and bought them both coffee and a pack of those little peanut butter crackers, and when she got back in the truck, she handed him the crackers without looking at him and said, "In case you get hungry, you don't eat when you're stressed. I noticed." "You noticed?" "Yeah." "Okay." They pulled into Duke at nearly 8 at night. The children's hospital was a fortress of glass and light, and Chloe woke up in the parking garage and said, "Is this the place where they fix me?" "This is the place, Bug. It's big. It's big." "Am I going to be scared?" "A little? Maybe. That's okay. I'm going to be here. Sienna's going to be here." "Sienna's going to be here too?" "Yeah," Sienna said from the passenger seat. Her voice was a little rough. "I'm going to be here the whole time." "Okay," Chloe said. "Okay, that's good. That's good." They checked in. They filled out forms. A nurse named Beverly took Chloe's vitals and made her laugh about a stethoscope joke. A child life specialist came in and explained what would happen in the morning with a little felt doll and a felt IV. Chloe listened very seriously. She asked 2 questions, both good ones. The specialist looked at Landon with the look people looked at him with when they realized his kid was smarter than they'd planned for. At 11, a different nurse came and said they were going to settle Chloe in for the night. Landon kissed her forehead. He told her she was the bravest person he knew. She said, "Dad, I'm the only kid you know." He said that didn't change the math. She laughed, and she went. He stood in the hall outside her room. Sienna was beside him. He didn't know when she'd gotten there. She'd been a step behind him the whole day, small and quiet and in the right place at the right time. And now she was standing next to him in a pediatric hospital hallway in Durham with her arms crossed over her stomach like she was holding something in. And he looked at her and he said the thing he had not planned to say. "Thank you." Her face very slowly began to crumple. She held it together, but barely. "Landon." "Don't say anything." Don't say anything, Sienna, please. Just don't." She nodded. She didn't say anything. He looked at his phone. There was a text on it from a number he didn't recognize. A 646 area code? New York. It had come in 40 minutes ago. "Mr. Hayes, my name is Douglas Vale. I am my daughter's father. I would very much like to meet with you on Wednesday at a time and place of my choosing. I believe we have things to discuss. If you refuse this meeting, I will ensure that within 30 days you are not able to operate your business, hold any employment in the state of North Carolina, or retain the custody of your child. This is not a threat. This is a courtesy." He read it twice. He put the phone back in his pocket. Sienna was watching him. She had seen his face change. "What?" she said. "Nothing." "Landon." "Nothing. It's nothing." Was that him? He didn't answer. She closed her eyes. "Landon, tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow first. We get through tomorrow. We get her through tomorrow. Everything else can wait. Do you understand me? Everything else waits." She opened her eyes. She looked at him. Her eyes were that dark color between brown and gray, the color of wet bark. And there was something in them that was no longer the thing that had walked into his shop in a $2,000 coat. There was something in them that was new. "Everything else waits," she said. "Good." They stood there in the hospital hallway, and the intercom crackled overhead, and a cart went by somewhere, and under the fluorescent lights, without either of them meaning to, without either of them even noticing it at first, their hands found each other between them and held on. Neither of them said anything about the hands. They let go a few seconds later, the way you let go of something you didn't mean to pick up in the first place, and they moved apart, and Landon cleared his throat and said something about coffee, and Sienna said something about finding the cafeteria, and they walked down the hall together in the kind of silence that had weight to it. Neither of them mentioned the text. Neither of them mentioned the hands. They drank bad coffee in a waiting area on the 4th floor, and they sat in two chairs with an empty chair between them, and at some point after midnight, Sienna fell asleep, sitting up with her cheek pressed against the window, and her breath fogging a little spot on the glass, and Landon sat there watching the heating vent push strands of her hair across her forehead, and he thought, this is not happening. This is not happening. I'm not going to let this happen. He was wrong about that. He already knew he was wrong about that, but it was a thing he had to tell himself for a few more hours, so he told himself. At 5:30, a nurse came in and said they could go down to pre-op. Chloe was already awake. She was sitting up in the hospital gown with the little blue animals on it, and her hair was a mess, and she had a look on her face he recognized, the Marine look, the I'm deciding about you right now look. Except this time she was deciding about the whole morning, about the whole building, about the people with the clipboards and the machines that beeped and the little plastic bracelet on her wrist that had her name and date of birth printed on it in ink that wouldn't smear. She took it all in. Then she held out her arms, and Landon picked her up, and she said into his shoulder, Dad, if I die, tell Mommy I didn't do it on purpose. He almost dropped her. Bug. What? You're not gonna die. I know, but just in case. You're not gonna die, Chloe. I know. Don't say that stuff. Why? Because it scares me. She pulled back. She looked at him with the green eyes, the unfair, ridiculous green, and she patted his cheek with her small hand, the one without the IV, and she said, Dad, you can be scared. That's okay. He did not cry in front of his daughter. He had made that deal with himself very early on the porch of the funeral home the day of Marin's service, and he had not broken it once in 16 months. He did not cry now. He put his mouth on top of her head, and he held her, and he said, I love you more than anything in the world, Bug. I love you more than anything in the whole world. I love you more than anything in the whole world in outer space. Dad! What? Outer space counts as the world. Does it? Yeah, it's the same thing. Okay, then I love you infinity plus one. You can't say plus one after infinity. I just did. That's not allowed. Who says? Math. He laughed into her hair. He was still laughing when the nurse came in with the gurney, and Chloe looked at the gurney and looked at him and held out her hand and said, Dad, I changed my mind. I want to stay here with you. And the nurse's face did its professional thing, and Landon's insides did a thing that was not professional at all. And Sienna, who had been standing very still by the window the whole time, the way she had learned to stand by the window in this family, small and useful and out of the way, crossed the room in 3 steps and crouched down by the gurney as they were lifting Chloe onto it, and said, Hey, it's okay. Your dad is going to be right here when you wake up. I'm going to be right here when you wake up. We're not going anywhere, okay? Okay, Chloe said. Promise. Promise. Pinky promise. Chloe hooked her small pinky around Sienna's, and Sienna did that thing with her thumb, the little press at the end, and Chloe's face settled. Just a little. Just enough. And then they took her. Landon stood in the hallway and watched the double doors swing shut and then not swing. And then he realized he was standing in the hallway, and he realized Sienna was beside him, and he realized she had not let go of his elbow, and he realized he wasn't going to make her. 4 to 6 hours, he said to no one. Okay, Sienna said. Okay, let's sit down. They sat down. The surgical waiting area at Duke was bigger than his whole workshop, all pale wood and quiet fabric and magazines nobody read, and there was a woman at a desk who offered them tea. In a voice so gentle, Landon thought for a second he was going to lose it right there, and Sienna said yes to the tea for both of them. And the woman brought it in paper cups that said Duke Children's on the side, and Landon held the paper cup in his hands and did not drink the tea. He looked at his phone. The message from Douglas Vale was still there. He hadn't deleted it. He hadn't answered it. He didn't know what to do with it, so he did nothing. That was a strategy he had gotten very good at over the last 16 months. At 7:40, the automatic doors at the far end of the waiting room opened, and a man walked in who did not belong at Duke Children's Hospital at 7:40 in the morning any more than Sienna Vale had belonged in a furniture workshop in a mountain town 12 days ago. He was wearing a charcoal overcoat that ended at the exact right place on his calves. His hair was silver and cut close. He was maybe 60. He walked like a man who had never, in his entire life, had to stand to the side for anyone, and he was walking directly toward them. Landon felt Sienna's hand go white on the arm of her chair.
"Oh no," she said very quietly. "Oh no."
Landon stood up. He didn't plan to. His body stood up before his head caught up. "Sienna, stay there." Landon says, "Bus, stay there." He walked out to meet him. He did not want this man anywhere near his daughter's operating room. He did not want this man anywhere near the woman who was sitting in the chair with the paper cup going cold in her hands. He walked out to meet him the way you walked out to meet a dog that had gotten loose on your property. Not aggressive, just solid, body between the dog and the house. Douglas Vale stopped a few feet from him. He looked Landon up and down. The sawdust wasn't there today, but the rest of him was. The two big khakis, the boots, the hands. Douglas Vale cataloged him in about 2 seconds and allowed himself the smallest smile. Not friendly, just the smile of a man who had placed you on a chart. "Mr. Hayes, you shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't? My daughter is in surgery." "Your daughter is sitting in there waiting. You can say whatever you came to say somewhere else." "She's my daughter too, Mr. Hayes. She's a grown woman." Douglas Vale laughed. It was a small laugh and short, and it wasn't really a laugh. "Is she?" "Well, I suppose that depends on your definition. Mr. Hayes, I'm not here to fight with you. I flew down from New York last night. I got a call Sunday afternoon from a colleague in Charlotte who congratulated me on my daughter's marriage. You can imagine my surprise. I'd been under the impression she was engaged to a man named Benedict Cross. Which is to say, I was under the impression she was doing what she said she was going to do. Silly me. Mr. Vale, let me finish."
Landon shut his mouth. "Thank you. Mr. Hayes, I'm going to say this to you very plainly because I am told you are the kind of man who appreciates plain speech. I don't want to be cruel to you. I genuinely don't. I read about your wife. I'm sorry. I read about your daughter. I'm sorry about that too. I'm a father. I understand certain things about what a father will do. If you need money for your daughter's surgery, I will wire it to this hospital today, this morning, in full, whatever the number is. Double the number. I will make it so that my daughter never has to sign another piece of paper on your behalf again. All I'm asking in return is that you go upstairs when this is over and you tell her this was a mistake, that you don't love her, that you never loved her, that it was about the money, and now the money is handled and everyone can go home." Landon stared at him. "You came here," he said slowly, "to the hospital where my daughter is in surgery, to offer me money, to lie to yours, to free yours. Yes, get out of here. Mr. Hayes, get out of here before I do something I'm going to have to apologize for." Douglas Vale's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes did. "You misunderstand me. I am not making a threat. I am making an offer. You appear to think these are different things. In my experience, Mr. Hayes, when a man like me makes an offer to a man like you, the distinction is academic. I'm going to leave you my card. You have until the end of the week. After that, I stop making offers." He took a card out of a small silver case. He held it out. Landon didn't take it. Douglas Vale set it on the coffee table between them, the little stack of unread magazines, and he said, "Tell my daughter I'll be at the Washington Duke. Tell her I'll wait for her." And then he turned around and he walked out and the automatic doors slid shut behind him and he was gone. Landon stood there a minute. His hands were fists. He opened them. He picked up the card off the table. He looked at it. Douglas E. Vale, Vale and Company, an address in Manhattan, a phone number, nothing else. He put it in his back pocket. When he turned around, Sienna was standing in the middle of the waiting room with both hands pressed against her mouth, and her face was white. A woman with a little girl on her lap had stopped pretending not to watch. The desk lady had stopped pretending not to watch. Landon crossed the room in 4 strides, and he put his hand on the small of Sienna's back and he steered her, not rough, just clear, out a side door into a small courtyard where there was a stone bench under a bare dogwood and a fountain that had been turned off for the winter. She sat down on the bench. She wasn't crying. Her hands were still at her mouth. "Sienna." "He flew down." "Yeah. He flew down here." "I know. He offered you money." "He offered me money." Oh, I'm going to be sick." She didn't throw up.
She leaned forward and she put her head between her knees and she breathed. He sat next to her on the bench and he put his hand between her shoulder blades, through the thin fabric of her gray Henley, and he held it there, the flat of his palm. That was all. He didn't rub circles. He didn't pat. He just held it there and he felt her ribs go up and down, and eventually the breathing evened out. Sienna, I'm okay. Okay. I'm sorry. You got nothing to apologize for. I am so sorry. Hey, stop. She sat up. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't cried, which was a thing he had started to notice about her. She was very good at the eyes being wet and the face not giving out. She had learned that somewhere. Probably from him. Douglas. What did you tell him? She said. I told him to leave. Landon. What? What did you say when he made the... I told him to leave. I didn't take the money, Sienna. She closed her eyes. I know you didn't. Then why are you asking? Because I needed to hear it. All right. I'm sorry. I should have known he wouldn't just call. He'd come. He always comes. I should have told you. You told me. Not enough. Enough. You told me enough. She was quiet a minute. The little fountain, the dry one, had a few dead leaves in the bottom, and some of them moved when the wind moved, and one of them went up into a little spiral and then came down again, and Sienna watched it do that the way people watch small, pointless things when they're trying not to fall apart. He's going to keep coming, she said. You understand that, right? This was the first one. The first one is always the soft one. The first one is the one where he reminds you he can afford to be generous. The next one, she stopped. She swallowed. The next one is not going to look like this. All right. Landon, I mean it. You don't know what he's... Sienna. What? My kid is in surgery right now. I know. I can't have this conversation with you right now. Not today. I can't hold two things today. I can hold one. Today I'm holding her. She nodded. She pressed her lips together hard. Okay. We'll figure your dad out, but not right now. Right now I need you to come back inside and sit in the chair and be in the chair with me. Can you do that? Yes. Okay. They went back inside. The tea was cold. The desk lady brought them fresh without being asked, and this time he drank it. At 12:10, Dr. Patel came out. She was still in her scrubs. She had her mask pulled down around her neck, and her hair was flat against her forehead where the cap had been. And her face was the face of a woman who had been standing up for 5.5 hours, but she was smiling. Smiling. Landon stood up so fast he knocked over the paper cup. She did great. She did great, Landon. We got all of it. The margins are clean, as far as we can tell right now. She's in recovery. She's going to be groggy. She's going to want you. Come with me. He went. He didn't feel his feet. Sienna stayed in the waiting room. He didn't ask her to. She just did. He looked back at her as the automatic doors opened and she was standing by the chair with her arms crossed around herself, and her face was doing the wet eyes thing again, and she gave him a small thumbs up, and he turned around and followed Dr. Patel into the back. Chloe was in a crib bed with rails up, and there was a blanket over her with the little blue animals on it, and her cheeks were pink and her mouth was a little parted, and her hair was stuck to her forehead with sweat, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his whole life, including the day she had been born, including every day since. He leaned over the rail, and he put his lips on her temple, and he said her name, and she made a small mumble, and her hand moved. Hey, Bug. Dad. I'm here. I did it. You did it, baby. Did I die? You didn't die. Okay, good. I love you infinity +1, +2, +2. She went back to sleep. He stood there holding the rail of the bed and he cried. He cried the way a man cries who has been holding it for 16 months, silently and without making a single sound, with his mouth shut tight and his shoulders shaking and the snot running down his nose and into his beard. And when he was done, he wiped his face with the back of his hand and he kissed his daughter's temple again, and he said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Tons or some, I give. To nobody, to everybody, to the ceiling of the recovery room at Duke Children's Hospital, and to the nurse who was checking the IV and politely not looking at him, and to the Dr. Patel who was no longer in the room, and to the woman in the waiting area beyond the doors who had not left. They kept Chloe for 3 days. She did better than anyone expected. On the second day, she was sitting up and complaining that the hospital apple juice tasted wrong, and she wanted the kind at home, the kind in the little box with the bendy straw. On the third day, when they took the last of the tubes out, she looked at the Velcro on her wrist where the IV had been and said, with enormous dignity, "I am a warrior." The nurse laughed so hard she had to leave the room. Sienna was there for all of it. She did not try to be Chloe's mother. That was the thing. She did not try. She read the rabbit book, and when Chloe wanted a different book, she read a different book, and when Chloe wanted nothing, Sienna sat in the corner chair with her paperback and was just furniture in the room, another warm object in the ecosystem, and when Chloe reached out without looking, Sienna's hand was there to be held. It was a strange thing to watch. It was a thing Landon had not expected to watch, and he didn't know what to do with the watching. He tried for a day and a half to not have a feeling about it. He did not succeed. On the fourth day, they drove home. Chloe slept most of the way. She was in the back, in the car seat with the little unicorn on the buckle. The one Marin had picked out because she had said, "If we're going to have one ugly thing in the car, Lanny, it might as well be a unicorn the baby likes." Landon drove. Sienna was in the passenger seat. The light on the way back was long and yellow, late winter moving toward early spring in the Piedmont. The bare trees with just the first fuzz of what would be leaves. And Landon drove with his hand on the wheel and his other hand, at some point outside Winston-Salem, coming to rest on the console between them. Sienna's hand came to rest there too. Neither of them said anything. They just drove. His thumb moved, once, across her knuckle. Hers moved, once, across his. They did not hold hands. They did not look at each other. They just drove, and by Hickory the sun was going down. And by the time they got home it was dark. He carried Chloe upstairs asleep and put her in her bed. Sienna made them sandwiches. They ate standing up in the kitchenette, the radiator dying behind them, and she said, "Landon," and he said, "Tomorrow, Sienna, tomorrow." She nodded. She went to the couch. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom for a minute. The bedroom he hadn't been able to go into for 16 months, the one he had emptied out and aired out and remade for her on Sunday morning, and he thought about offering it to her now. He didn't. He thought about telling her he could take the couch. He didn't. He closed the door, his own closed door, and he lay down on the bed in his dead wife's room, on the clean sheets. With the ceiling above him, a ceiling he had not looked at in 16 months, and he listened to her breathing in the other room and he thought, "I am in trouble. I am in so much trouble," and he slept. For 3 weeks after that, nothing happened. That was how it felt, anyway. Chloe recovered. She got stronger. She started asking for the heavy food Landon had been afraid to feed her for a year and a half. The hamburgers with the real cheese, the thick noodles with butter, the peanut butter straight out of the jar with a spoon. She put on a pound and then another pound. Her hair, which had been fine and a little thin on top, started coming back in with a new density behind the ears. He kept catching himself staring at her. He would be at the workbench and he would look up and see her on the floor with her pile of wood scraps, and her eyes bright and her cheeks pink, and he would have to sit down for a second because his knees didn't want to hold him. Sienna slept on the couch. She did not ask for the bedroom. She did not sleep in the bedroom. She did not go into the bedroom. She made herself, in the small apartment with no real privacy and no extra room, as small as a person could make herself, and she did it with a kind of deliberate grace that Landon recognized after the first week for what it was. Not deference, not performance. Discipline. She was doing it on purpose. She had decided something about what she was going to be in this apartment, and she was being that thing. In the morning, she went downstairs and opened the shop and made coffee. She answered the phone when he was with a customer. She started without asking, keeping the books, which Landon had been doing on the back of envelopes for years. And within 10 days, she had them in a spreadsheet that made him feel both grateful and a little irritated, because she had done in 10 days what he had failed to do in 11 years. "You own a company," he said to her one night over the kind of cheap pasta that he had eaten 4 nights a week for 15 years. "I don't own anything. I was a junior VP at my father's firm," which is not the same thing. "What does a junior VP at your father's firm do?"
Mostly I approved budgets. I was good at it. I liked the math part. So I got a junior VP doing my books. Yeah. For a furniture shop. Yeah. In North Carolina. Yeah, Landon. I'm not complaining. I know. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. She looked at him across the tiny kitchen table, and for a second the thing between them, the thing neither of them had said out loud, the thing in the car outside Winston-Salem, the thing in the hallway at Duke. It was right there, sitting on the kitchen table between the pasta and the parmesan. Neither of them said anything. Chloe from the couch said, "Dad, can I have ice cream?" "No." "Sienna, can I have ice cream?" "No, Bug." Aw. 3 weeks in, a man walked into the shop who did not belong. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Landon was alone downstairs. Sienna had taken Chloe to the pediatrician for her 2-week follow-up, and the bell rang and a small, balding man in a good suit came in and took one look at the shop and visibly suppressed a grimace. "I'm looking for Landon Hayes." "Who's asking?" "Are you him?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Gerald Philbrick. I represent certain interests that have reason to be concerned about the ownership structure of this establishment." "What?" "I represent the bank that holds the lien on this property." "I don't have a lien on this property." "Mr. Hayes, I'm afraid you do. As of Monday." Landon set down his chisel. He walked around the workbench very slowly. He stood about 4 feet from Gerald Philbrick, and he looked down at him, and Gerald Philbrick, to his credit, held his ground. "Explain. The building you occupy was purchased at auction on Friday by an entity called Crescent Pines, LLC. The lease you have been paying on month to month is no longer active. Crescent Pines, LLC is willing to continue your tenancy under revised terms. I have the new lease with me. You'll find the new monthly rent is substantially higher than the rent you have been paying." "Substantially higher?" "Yes. By how much?" 4 times. Landon laughed. It wasn't a laugh. It was the other laugh. The one from before. 4 times. Yes. My rent is $1,100 a month. The new rent is $4,400. I understand this is a significant increase. If you find the terms untenable, we are prepared to offer a relocation incentive. Get out. Mr. Hayes, get out of here before I put you through that door. Gerald Philbrick quickly put the lease on the workbench and said, "The first payment at the new rate is due April 1st. You have 30 days. If you fail to pay or vacate the eviction process," and Landon took a step toward him, and Gerald Philbrick found his footing again very suddenly and made for the door, and the bell rang, and he was gone. Landon stood in the middle of his shop, and he looked at the lease on the workbench. Crescent Pines, LLC. He did not need to look it up. He knew, in his gut, in the place where he knew everything that mattered, exactly who owned Crescent Pines, LLC. The soft one had been the money. The next one was not going to look like that. Sienna had told him so, in the courtyard at Duke, with her head between her knees. He picked up the lease. He put it in the drawer with the grocery list and the photograph and the little velvet box that didn't have a ring in it anymore. He locked the drawer. He went back to the chisel. And when Sienna came back with Chloe an hour later, and Chloe ran into the shop with a sticker on her shirt that said, "I was brave at the doctor," Landon picked her up and spun her around until she squealed. And Sienna stood in the doorway and watched them with that look on her face, the one that was not guarded anymore, the one he had first seen in the hospital hallway. And he did not tell her about the lease. He did not tell her for 3 days. He told her on the 3rd day, at 10 at night, after Chloe was asleep. He told her because she had come out of the kitchen drying her hands on a dish towel and said, "You've been weird for 3 days. Tell me." So he told her. She sat down on the couch. She looked at the floor for a long time. $4,400, she said quietly. "Yeah." "He bought the building." "Yeah." He bought the building to put a rent on it you can't pay, to drive you out." "To drive us out." She closed her eyes. "Landon." "What?" "I'm going to fix it." "You don't have to fix it. I'm going to fix it." "Sienna." "What?" He sat down next to her on the couch. He did not touch her. He wanted to. He did not. "If you pay it," he said,
He knows he can push us. He'll do it again and again. He'll find the next thing, the suppliers, the bank. He's got more money than we've got. He's got more time than we've got. We can't outmoney him. You know that. You know your father better than I do. I know. So paying the rent doesn't fix it. Paying the rent just makes the next thing happen faster. I know, Landon. Then what are you going to fix? She opened her eyes. She looked at him. Him? What? I'm going to fix him. Sienna, there's a charity gala in 2 weeks in Charlotte. It's the Vail Foundation's spring thing. He runs it. Every person he does business with is going to be there. Every person he wants to do business with is going to be there. It's the room, Landon. It's his room. And I'm going to go to it. And I'm going to take you. No. Yes. No, Sienna, absolutely not. You want me to put on a rented suit and walk into a room full of...
I want you to come with me into the room where my father has set up his life. And I want to stand next to you in that room, and I want him to look at me and understand that he has lost. That's what I want. That's the only thing I want. Because he's not going to stop. He is not going to stop, Landon. Not until I make him stop. In public, in front of everyone he knows. Because private doesn't mean anything to him. Private he can undo. Public, he can't. He can cut you off. He already cut me off. He cut me off the day I stopped answering his calls. He can cut you out. Let him. Sienna. Let him, Landon. Her voice cracked. She put her hand over her mouth. She took it away. She said more quietly, I have spent my entire life being what he needed me to be. I was an obedient daughter. I was a polite fiancée to a man I couldn't stand. I gave him every version of myself he asked for, and every time I gave him one, he asked for the next one. And the first thing I have ever done that he didn't give me permission to do was walk into your shop, Landon. That is the first thing. And he's going to take this too, if I let him. He's going to take it piece by piece. He's going to take your business and your apartment, and he's going to find a way to take Chloe, and he's going to take you. He's going to take you from me. And I'm not going to let him. I'm not going to let him. She was crying now. He had not seen her cry. He had seen her eyes be wet. He had not seen her cry. He sat on the couch next to her, and he did not know where to put his hands. Sienna, I'm okay. Come here. What? Come here. He opened his arm. She looked at him. She looked at the arm. She did the thing where her face almost held it together and then didn't, and she leaned into his side, and he put his arm around her, and he held her with her face in his flannel, and she cried. Not a lot, not loud, but a real cry. The first one he had seen on her, and he thought distantly, the way you think things when you are holding a crying person, this is the one. This is the thing I was supposed to be careful of. This is what Ruth meant. He didn't let go. He held on. 1. She went to her father. She called him the next morning. She asked for a meeting. He said yes. He said it with a smoothness that told her, before she even got to Charlotte, that he thought he had already won. She drove down alone. She took the silver sedan. Landon had not wanted her to go alone. She had told him she had to. They had fought about it a little, in the shop, in the early morning, with Chloe still asleep upstairs. It was the first fight they'd had, and it was quiet, and it was hard, and it ended with Sienna with her hand on the door, and her jaw set, and Landon standing with his arms crossed by the workbench and saying finally, all right, go. But you call me at noon. You hear me? You call me at noon. Itasin de buitsuis chakien. She called him at noon. Landon, are you okay? I'm okay. I'm at a diner on Tryon. I'm okay. What happened? She laughed shakily. I'm going to the gala. What? He thinks I'm coming back. He thinks the meeting went his way. I let him think it. He wants me there. He wants me there on his arm. He's telling people I'm going to announce the end of my rash choices. That's what he called it. Sienna, I'm going, Landon, and you're going with me. I already rented you a tux. It's in the trunk. I'll be home by 6. We're going. Sienna, if he sees me, he's going to see you. That's the entire point. Landon, listen to me. I know I am asking you to do something that is not fair. I know. I know what you gave up already. I know what you signed. I know it is not fair to ask you for this. But I'm asking. I'm asking. I need you to walk into that room with me. I need you to not let go of my hand. That's all I need. Will you do it? He was silent a long time. Landon, when is it? 2 weeks, Saturday, 7 o'clock.
He closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter asleep upstairs, her hair coming back in curly. He thought about Marin, 16 months gone, who had once, at a wedding in Asheville, made him dance to a song he hated because she had wanted to dance, and he had been her husband. He thought about his dead father's voice. You earn it or you don't touch it, Lanny. And he thought for the first time in a long time, Dad, I don't think you were right about everything. I'll do it, he said. He heard her let out a breath. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank you, Landon? Don't thank me yet, Sienna. Let's see what happens first, okay? Come home, okay? He hung up. He stood in the shop, alone, with the afternoon light going across the workbench, and he looked at his hands, and he understood, with a kind of quiet clarity, that in 2 weeks he was going to walk into a ballroom full of people who had never once in their lives stood next to a man like him without looking past him, and he was going to stand next to Sienna Vale with his hand in hers, and he was going to let the most powerful man in the state of New York do whatever the most powerful man in the state of New York was going to do, and he was going to let him, and he was going to do it with his mouth shut and his head up, and he was going to keep her. Because here was the thing he understood, finally, standing in his empty shop with the radiator dying and his daughter asleep upstairs and the afternoon light going thin on the walnut dresser. He was going to keep her, not the way a man keeps a contract, not the way a man keeps a deal, the other way. The way a man keeps a thing he wasn't looking for and didn't deserve and couldn't pay for and couldn't let go of. He stood in the shop. He didn't say it out loud. He wasn't ready to. He didn't know if he'd ever be ready to. But he stood in the shop and he thought it, very clearly, very plainly, the way his mother had taught him to think important things when he was a boy, so that he would never be able to pretend later that he hadn't known. I love her. I love her. I love her. And on the wall behind him, pinned up with a rusted thumbtack, the drawing of a stick-figure father holding a stick-figure daughter watched him think it, and did not, as it had not for 16 months, say anything at all. The 2 weeks between that phone call and the gala passed the way the last 2 weeks of a long illness pass. Slow in the hours and fast in the days, with the strange clarity that comes to a person who has stopped pretending they can stop what's coming. Landon worked. He had always worked, but he worked harder now. The way a man works when working is the only place his hands still know how to be. He finished the walnut dresser for the woman in Asheville. He finished the music box. He finished a rocking chair a couple in Hendersonville had ordered in November, and a coffee table with a live edge, and a small stool for Chloe because she had asked for one in her own size. He worked until his back ached and his hands were the color of the wood he was working, and Sienna worked too, downstairs beside him and upstairs after, with the books and the emails and a small laptop she had plugged in on the kitchen table like a person settling in. On the second Monday, she came down from the apartment with a yellow legal pad and a look on her face he'd started to recognize. I want to try something. Okay. The toys. What toys? The little ones. The scraps you give Chloe, the cars and the animals. You made her a sea turtle yesterday out of the end of a pine board, and she hasn't put it down. Landon. I've been watching her. Okay. I looked up the numbers. There are 3 outfits in the state who make handmade wooden toys and sell them online. 2 of them use soft wood from... It doesn't matter. The point is you're better than all of them. You don't know that. You don't know it because you've never looked. I looked. Sienna. What? I'm not trying to be a toy company. I know. I'm not asking you to be a toy company. I'm asking you to make 20 sea turtles. I'll sell them. 20 sea turtles? 20 sea turtles. I can make 20 sea turtles in a week. Good. He stared at her. She stared back. She had the yellow legal pad pressed against her chest, and her hair in a ponytail, and a smear of something that might have been pencil lead on her cheek. And she looked, for the first time since the day he'd met her, not like a woman who had run away from something, but like a woman who had started building something. He made the sea turtles. She sold all 20 in 4 days. He made 40 more. She sold those too. By the end of the first week, he had a small spiral notebook on the workbench with names and shipping addresses in it in her handwriting, and he had started cutting pine in the evenings after Chloe was in bed, and she had set up a little folding table near the front window with the finished pieces on it. And when customers came in for other things, they would stop on the way out and pick up a small wooden fox or a small wooden bear or a small wooden whale with a perfectly shaped tail. And they would turn it in their hands, and more often than not, they would buy it. By the end of the second week, Sienna had quietly transferred $3,100 out of the toy account and into the shop account, and she had not asked him about it, and he had not asked her about it, and the rent notice from Crescent Pines LLC was still sitting in the drawer under the till, not paid, not vacated, waiting. Thursday night, she stood at the bottom of the stairs in a dress he didn't know she owned. She was holding it up in front of her the way women did when they were asking without asking. Saturday. Is that what you're wearing? Is it okay? It was a dark green. Not bright. Not quiet either. It was the color of river moss in late spring, and it was going to make her eyes look like that thing, the wet bark thing. And he could already see what she was going to look like in it in that room in Charlotte. And he understood, standing at the top of the stairs with a chisel still in his hand, that he was not going to survive Saturday night without doing something he had been trying not to do. It's okay. Landon. What? You could say more than it's okay. It's good. It's good, Sienna. She smiled, small, tired. All right. The tux fits. I know. I had it altered. When? While you were asleep. You measured me while I was asleep. Just the shoulders. Jesus. She laughed. It was the first laugh that had happened in the apartment in 3 days. Chloe's voice came from the couch. What's funny? And Sienna called back, Your dad is funny. And Chloe said, He's not that funny. And Sienna said, He thinks he is. And Landon stood there on the landing with the chisel in his hand, and he thought, Okay. Saturday. One thing at a time. Mom. Saturday came. Ruth drove up from Marion in her old Bronco to sit with Chloe. She came in the late afternoon with a bag of knitting and a casserole dish and a look on her face that said she had opinions she was not going to share. And she kissed Chloe hello, and she kissed Landon hello, and she looked at Sienna, and Sienna, to her credit, stood still and let Ruth look at her. You're the girl. Yes, ma'am. Ruth, this is... I know who she is, Lanny. Go put on your tie. You look like a man who hasn't worn a tie since his wedding. He went to put on his tie. When he came back down, Ruth was sitting on the couch with Chloe on her lap and a book open in front of them, and Sienna was at the top of the stairs in the green dress with her hair up and small gold earrings on, and Chloe saw him in the tux, and her eyes went huge, and she said, Dad? What, Bug? You look like a prince. I look like a waiter. Dad, I do. I look like I'm about to refill somebody's water. Ruth looked up over the top of her glasses. Her eyes moved from Landon in the tux to Sienna on the stairs and back to Landon, and her mouth did a thing that was either a smile or the beginning of a sentence she decided not to say. You two be careful. Yes, ma'am. You hear me, Lanny? Careful. I hear you. At the door, Chloe climbed down off the couch and came running over, barefoot, her hair in 2 small braids Ruth had done, and she grabbed Landon's hand and pulled him down and kissed him on the cheek, and then she turned and she held her arms up to Sienna, and Sienna, after a second where her whole face did something complicated, bent down and picked her up. Sienna, you have to come back. I'm coming back, Bug. Both of you have to come back. Both of us. Pinky promise. Sienna hooked her pinky. She did the thumb thing. Chloe's face settled. Landon did not trust his voice. He kissed his daughter's forehead. He opened the door. They went out into the night. Charlotte at 7 on a Saturday was glass and rain and red tail lights, and the Whitmore Hotel was lit up for a party the way the whole city was lit up for the party. The ballroom was on the 2nd floor. You could see it from the street. The tall windows, the chandeliers, the bodies moving slow inside. Landon drove the truck around back, and a valet in a red jacket looked at the truck, the way the receptionist had looked at his boots. And Sienna got out before Landon could say anything, and she said to the valet, It's fine. Take it, and handed him the key, and the valet, bless him, did not hesitate. He took the key. He took the truck. He drove it away. Inside, they walked across a lobby with marble on the floor and up a staircase with brass on the railings. and at the top of the staircase, a woman in a black dress with a clipboard said, "Name?" And Sienna said, "Vale, Sienna Vale and Landon Hayes." And the woman looked at her list and her eyes moved just a little, and she smiled without any warmth, and she said, "Of course, Ms. Vale. Welcome." Sienna did not let go of his hand. The ballroom was the room he had pictured, and it was not. It was bigger than he had pictured. The ceiling was higher. The chandeliers were 3, not 1, and they were the real kind, crystal, not glass. There was a string quartet in a corner playing something he did not recognize, and there were 200 people in a room meant for 300, which was the kind of math rich people did on purpose, so that the room would always feel full and never feel crowded. The men were in tuxedos. The women were in this kind of dresses that took a person an hour to get into. The air smelled like expensive flowers and expensive liquor and expensive perfume, all 3 at once, in a way that caught in the back of his throat and made his eyes water, a little, the way the paint thinner fumes did in the shop when he forgot to open the window. A waiter appeared at his elbow with a tray of champagne. "No, thank you." The waiter vanished. Sienna's hand tightened on his. "Do you see him?" he said under his breath. "Not yet." "How many of these people know you?" "All of them." "Great. Walk." They walked. They walked through the room, and he watched them see her. It was a thing you could see happen. A small turn of a head, a drink paused halfway to a mouth, a conversation that didn't stop but changed shape. Somewhere past the ice sculpture of a swan, a woman in pearls said, just loud enough, "Is that her?" And the man she was with said, "Oh, don't." And she said, "With him?" And the man said, "Patricia, don't." And they walked past, and Landon did not look at them, and Sienna did not look at them, and her hand in his did not move. They got halfway across the room. "There," she said. He followed her eyes. Douglas Vale was standing near a low dais at the far end of the room, under the middle chandelier, in conversation with 3 other men of his approximate age and species. He had a champagne glass in his hand. He was smiling at something one of the other men had said. He had not seen her yet, and then he did. Landon watched him see her. He watched Douglas Vale see his daughter across a ballroom in a green dress with her hand in the hand of a man in a rented tuxedo, and he watched Douglas Vale's face do for exactly 1 second the thing a person's face does when they realize they have miscalculated. It was a 1-second thing. Then it was gone, and the smile was back, and Douglas Vale excused himself from the 3 men and began to walk, unhurried, toward them. "Sienna," Landon said. "I know. Whatever you're going to do, I know, Landon. I'm right here. I know." Douglas Vale arrived. "Sweetheart." "Hi, Dad." "You came." "I said I would." "I didn't dare hope." He looked at Landon. He did not offer his hand. He did not need to. "Mr. Hayes." "Mr. Vale." "I don't believe you've been introduced to many of the people here. If you'll come with me, I'd like to—" "Actually," Sienna said, "I'd like to say something first. Before any of that. Dad, can we do it now? I want to get it over with." Douglas Vale smiled. It was the soft smile, the one Landon had seen at Duke across the magazines. "Of course, sweetheart, the program is starting in a few minutes. If you'd like to go up after I welcome everyone, I think that works." "Sienna." "That works, Dad. Thank you." Douglas Vale's smile did not move. His eyes did. He looked at his daughter the way a chess player looks at a board when he has realized, too late, that his queen is in the wrong square. Then he turned to the room and clapped his hands twice, not hard, just enough. And a small hush moved through the ballroom, and a man in a red coat stepped up to a microphone on the dais and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our chairman and this evening's host, Mr. Douglas Vale." The room applauded. Douglas Vale walked up to the dais and took the microphone, and he thanked everyone for coming, and he spoke briefly about the foundation's work this year: water projects, a school in Honduras, a hospital wing in Philadelphia. And he spoke warmly and easily, the way a man speaks when he has given 1,000 speeches in 1,000 rooms, and it has never once occurred to him that anyone might not listen. And at the end of it, as a kind of grace note, he said, "And before we begin the formal program, my daughter Sienna has asked for a moment. Sweetheart, come on up. Sienna's hand, for the first time all night, was shaking. Landon, go. Landon, if I go up there.
Go, Sienna. You're going to walk out of this building tonight, and you're going to be a man who's standing next to a woman who doesn't have anything. Sienna, go. She went. She walked up through the room in the green dress and the small gold earrings, and her father stepped back from the microphone and held out his hand, and she took his hand, and she stepped up onto the dais, and she looked out at the room full of people she had known her whole life, and she took a breath that Landon could see from where he was standing, and she began. Hi, everyone. Most of you know me. A lot of you have known me since I was small. My father is right. There's something I'd like to say, and I apologize, Dad. I'm about to say it differently than you think I'm going to say it. The room laughed, politely, the way that room laughed at everything. 3.5 weeks ago, Sienna said, I married a man named Landon Hayes. He is standing in the back of this room. Some of you have noticed him. He is a furniture restorer from McDowell County. He is a widower. He has a 4-year-old daughter named Chloe who had surgery 6 weeks ago at Duke Children's Hospital and who is, as of today, getting better. I married Landon under a contract. I won't pretend I didn't. I proposed the contract to him. He refused it. I pushed. He refused again. He only agreed when his daughter's life was in immediate danger and he had no other way to save her. He didn't love me when he signed it. He didn't want to sign it. He signed it the way a person signs something that is being held to his child's throat. I want all of you to understand that. I want all of you to hear me say it out loud. My husband did not marry me for love. He married me because I cornered him. I cornered him with money and with a hospital bill and with a 4-year-old girl's life. And I did it because I was running from a man who was planning to marry me off to a man I didn't love, in a family I didn't want, in a future I didn't choose. A sound went through the room. Not a gasp. Something quieter. The sound of 200 people deciding simultaneously not to move. That man, Sienna said, is my father. Douglas Vale's face was still, absolutely still. The only thing that moved on him was a muscle in his jaw that twitched once and was still again. I don't say that to hurt him. I say it because it's true. My father is a good businessman. My father has raised a great deal of money for a great many charities. My father is also a man who has never once, in my entire life, asked me what I wanted. He told me what I wanted, and then he arranged for me to get it. And for a long time I was grateful for that because it's easier. It is so much easier, I want you to know. It is so much easier to let a man like my father tell you who you are than it is to figure it out yourself. I recommend it if you can stomach it. I couldn't stomach it anymore. That's the only reason I'm up here. Not because I'm brave, because I couldn't stomach it anymore. Sienna turned her head. She looked directly at Landon. He could not move. His hand, without him telling it to, had risen halfway up his chest and stopped there. In the last 3.5 weeks, Sienna said, still looking at him, I have lived above a furniture workshop in a town most of you have never heard of. I have slept on a couch. I have done bookkeeping on a laptop on a kitchen table that wobbles. I have learned how a 4-year-old takes her medicine. I have watched a man stay up until 3 a.m. sanding a piece of wood, not because he has to, but because his hands don't know how to stop when he's worried. I have watched that same man, the morning after his daughter's surgery, bring me a cup of bad coffee in a plastic chair in a hospital waiting room at 5 a.m. Because he had noticed across the terror of that night that I had not had anything to drink in 4 hours. That is the man you have been watching across this room all night. That is the man my father has been trying to drive out of my life for 3 weeks. He has bought his building. He has raised his rent. He has offered him money in a hospital to lie to me. I'm told there is more coming. Dad, is there more coming? Douglas Vale said nothing. There is more coming. Okay? So here's what I'm doing. I am leaving. Tonight. I am leaving this foundation. I am leaving the firm. I am resigning my position, and I am signing away my claim on the trust. And Dad, I know you can hear me. I know your lawyers are here. I will sign whatever they put in front of me. I don't want any of it. I don't want the name. I don't want the apartment. I don't want the car. I'm walking out of this room with my husband, and I am going home with him, to that apartment above that shop,
to that couch, to that 4-year-old girl, and I am going to be his wife, not because he signed a paper, but because I would like to be, if he'll have me. I haven't asked him. I don't actually know what he'll say, but I thought it would be easier to ask him in front of all of you than in private, where I might not have the nerve. There was laughter. Someone laughed, a short, shocked laugh, and then it died. So, Landon Hayes, Sienna said, and her voice cracked just once. I would very much like to be your wife. Not on paper, the other way. I would like that very much. I am sorry for how I came into your life. I am sorry for the contract. I am sorry you had to sign it. I am asking if we can tear it up and start again, please. She stopped. The room did not move. Landon could not move. His hand was halfway up his chest, and it would not go up any further, and it would not come down. And there were 200 faces turned toward him, and the chandeliers were burning, and somewhere a waiter had stopped walking with a tray in his hand, and the string quartet had stopped playing between pieces and had not started again, and the ballroom was the quietest room in the state of North Carolina. And Landon Hayes, 32 years old, widower, furniture maker, father of a small brave girl with curly hair coming back in, walked across that ballroom. He walked in his rented tuxedo past the woman in pearls and the man who had told her not to. He walked past the ice swan. He walked past the waiter with the tray. He walked up to the dais and he climbed up onto it in his rented shoes, and he took Sienna Vale's hand, and he did not look at Douglas Vale, and he put his other hand on the side of Sienna's face, and he said, into the microphone because he didn't know how to say it any other way and didn't care anymore. Yes. Yes. Of course, yes. Come home. The room made a sound he would remember for the rest of his life. It was not applause. It was the sound 200 people make when they have been given permission to exhale. Somebody, somewhere, started clapping. It was not everyone. It was not even most people. But it was enough. It was enough. He took her hand. He walked her off the dais. He walked her back across the ballroom the way they had come, past the ice swan and the waiter and the woman in pearls, who was now not saying anything at all. And at the door he stopped, just for a second, and he looked back at Douglas Vale. Douglas Vale was still standing where he had been standing. He was holding his champagne glass at exactly the angle he had been holding it when his daughter had started speaking. His face had not moved. Their eyes met. Landon did not say anything. He did not need to. Douglas Vale looked, for the first time in all of this, like a man who was alone in a room. Landon turned around and he took his wife out of the ballroom and down the marble stairs and across the lobby and out into the cold, wet night in Charlotte. And the valet brought the truck around, and Sienna was shaking and crying and laughing all at once, and she could not stop. And Landon got her into the passenger seat, and he shut the door, and he walked around to the driver's side in a rented tuxedo in the rain, and he sat down behind the wheel, and he put both hands on it, and he started crying too, quietly, the way he had cried at Duke, without sound. And Sienna put her hand on the back of his neck, and they sat like that in the parking lot of the Whitmore Hotel for a long time, not going anywhere. Both of them breathing, both of them holding on. Sienna, yeah. What did we just do? I don't know. Okay. Let's go home. Okay. He put the truck in drive. They drove west out of Charlotte in the rain, past the city lights and the exit signs, into the foothills toward the small town nobody in that ballroom had ever heard of, where a 4-year-old girl with braids was asleep above a furniture workshop with a radiator that was, as always, dying, and where a grandmother named Ruth was sitting on a couch with her knitting in her lap, waiting up. They got home at 2 a.m, and Ruth was asleep on the couch with her knitting in her lap, and her reading glasses slid down her nose, and she opened one eye when the door clicked shut, and she looked at the two of them, the rented tuxedo, the green dress, the way Sienna was leaning into Landon's side like her knees were about to quit, and she said very dryly, "Well, that's a face. Ruth, don't tell me. Tell me in the morning. I'm too old for tonight." She put on her shoes. She kissed Landon on the cheek. She put a hand on Sienna's arm for a second, just a second, and she said, "Welcome home, honey." And she went out to the Bronco and drove away in the rain. Sienna stood in the middle of the apartment in the green dress. She looked around it like she was seeing it for the first time. The radiator was still dying. The couch still had the pillow on it. Chloe's nightlight was on in the corner of the bedroom, the one with the little yellow moon, and you could see the yellow spilling out across the floor in a long, soft stripe. She looked at all of it. She looked at him. Landon. Yeah. I don't have a bed yet. Yeah, you do. She looked at him. The other room, he said. It's been ready. It's been ready since March. I didn't know how to say so. She didn't say anything. She put her hand on his chest over the place where the tie was still knotted, and she kept it there. And he covered her hand with his own, and they stood like that for a while. Okay, she said. Okay. Douglas Vale sent a letter 3 weeks later. It came in a heavy cream envelope with his initials embossed on it, and inside was a single sheet of paper with his signature at the bottom and one sentence above the signature. It said, "Sienna, when you are ready, I would like to try again." That was all. She read it twice. She put it in the drawer under the till with the grocery list and the music box receipt and the old rent notice from Crescent Pines LLC, which had quietly been torn up a week after the gala when a new lease arrived from a new owner at the old rate. She didn't answer the letter that month. She didn't answer it the next month either. Around October, she sat down at the kitchen table one night with a pen and wrote him back. Landon didn't ask what she said. She didn't tell him. That spring, Douglas Vale drove down in a rental car, alone, no driver, and he sat on a stool in the workshop for an hour and watched his daughter's husband plane the edge of a board. And he did not say very much, and he let Chloe put 3 stickers on his overcoat, and before he left, he shook Landon's hand. It was not a warm handshake. It was a handshake. It was, Sienna said afterward, more than she had expected in her entire life. They would not become close. That was not the story. But he came back for Thanksgiving, and he came back for Chloe's birthday, and the third time he came back, he brought a small wooden horse he had bought at a market in Vermont, and he gave it to Chloe and said, awkwardly, the way a man says a thing he has never said before, "I thought you might like this." And Chloe put it on the shelf above her bed next to the sea turtle her father had made her out of a scrap of pine, and the two of them lived up there together, the one that had been bought and the one that had been made, and neither of them knew they were telling a story. The workshop grew. That was Sienna. She had the head for it, and she had the will, and by the second summer the little folding table near the window had become a second room, and the second room had become a small warehouse space 2 doors down on Main Street, and a woman named Lorraine had been hired to do the shipping, and a young man named Marcus, who had dropped out of the community college, had been hired to help with the finishing work. And the spiral notebook on the workbench had become a real system with real software, and the name on the side of the building was Hayes and Vale, because Sienna had insisted, and Landon had stopped arguing with her about things like that, because he had learned by then that she won those. Chloe grew too. Of course she did. That was the other miracle, the one no one had a name for. That a body that had been sick could stop being sick. That a little girl could just go on being a little girl, with scraped knees and chipped teeth and birthday parties with too much sugar. Her hair came back in curly, the way he had told her it would, a dark honey curl that would not hold a braid for more than an hour. Dr. Patel hugged him every time she saw them in the hallway for a follow-up, and every time she did it, she was a little less careful about her hair. And by the 3rd year, she was just hugging him and saying, "Okay, go live your life, Landon. I don't need to see you for 6 months, and then a year, and then not at all, unless something came up, and for a long time, nothing came up." They got married the second time on a Saturday in May in the backyard behind the workshop, under a dogwood that had finally bloomed. Ruth officiated. She had gotten a license off the internet, and she was very proud of it. There were 11 people there. Marcus came, and Lorraine came, and Dr. Patel came. Douglas Vale came. He stood in the back in a gray suit, and he did not make a speech, which was, Sienna said, his gift. Chloe wore a white dress and carried a basket of sourwood petals, and she dropped exactly 4 of them before losing interest and eating a cookie. Sienna wore a linen dress that had cost $42 at a shop in Asheville, and her hair was down, and there were no gold earrings. And when Landon said his vows, he forgot the ones he had written down and said instead, "You came into my shop. I didn't know what to do with you. I still don't half the time. I'm going to keep trying, for as long as you'll let me. That's what I've got, Sienna. That's all I've got. It's yours." And she laughed and cried at the same time, in the way he had gotten used to by then, and she said, "That'll do, Landon. That'll do.
Anspadi.
Later, when Chloe was in bed, they sat on the back step in the dark, and he put his arm around her, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, and somewhere a dog was barking, and somewhere a screen door was slapping shut, and the May air was soft and full of something that smelled like honeysuckle and cut grass. He had been thinking about it all day, the thing he wanted to say, and he still couldn't find a clean way to say it. So he just said it.
I used to think grief was the thing you carried. She waited. I used to think, after Marin, I used to think it was a rock. You just carry it. You get stronger or you don't. That was the whole deal. And the only thing a good man does is he doesn't set it down, because setting it down is, I don't know, betraying it. Something. Okay. It's not a rock. No. It's I don't know what it is.
It's a door. You can keep it shut. You can sit in front of it for the rest of your life. Or somebody knocks. Somebody walks in with a music box and a $2,000 coat, and they sit down and they don't leave. And you're still grieving. That doesn't stop. I miss her. I miss Marin. I'm going to miss her on Tuesday, and I'm going to miss her in November, and I'm going to miss her the day Chloe graduates from high school. That's not going to stop. But I don't sit in front of the door anymore. I walk through it. I come back out. That's what I didn't know you could do. Sienna was quiet. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense, Landon. Okay. I was running from my father when I walked into your shop. I know. I thought I was running toward an idea. I thought if I could find somebody who, I don't know. I thought I was being clever. I thought I was solving a problem. And I wasn't running from my father. I was running from the girl my father had made me be. That was the thing that was going to kill me. Not him. Her. And I didn't know how to stop being her by myself. I had to walk into somebody else's life to stop being her. And I picked yours. I picked the worst possible life to walk into. A widower and a sick kid and a workshop that was about to go under. And it turned out to be the only life I could have walked into, because it was the only one where I didn't have anywhere to put the old version of me. She didn't fit in the apartment. She didn't fit in the shop. She didn't fit next to Chloe. She couldn't come inside. Huh. Yeah. We're a couple of broken people, Sienna. Yeah. I think that's the whole thing. What? I think people want love to be, I don't know, pretty, shiny, fixed. I think people want to be fixed before they get loved, and then they get surprised when the fixing doesn't come first. That's not how it works. You don't get fixed and then get loved. You get loved, and then, a lot later, if you're lucky, you notice that some of the broken stuff is not gone. Just smaller. Smaller than it used to be. Quieter. That's the whole thing. That's all it is. The rest is just wood and bills and Tuesday and a kid's temperature at 3 a.m. Landon. What?
That's a speech. Shut up. That's a whole speech. Shut up, Sienna. She laughed. She put her face into his neck. Above them, the dogwood moved in a little wind, and a single white petal came loose and came down slowly, turning, and landed on the step beside her foot. She didn't see it. He saw it. He didn't say anything about it. Inside the house, his daughter was asleep, healthy, curly-haired, on the cusp of 6, with a small wooden horse on her shelf and a small wooden turtle beside it. Outside, the workshop was quiet, and the radiator had finally died last winter, and he had replaced it, and the new one did not sound like a dying cat, which he missed, a little, the way you miss the sound of something that had been there a long time. He kissed the top of Sienna Vale's head. She was Sienna Hayes now, on paper, but he still thought of her as Sienna Vale in his head sometimes. The woman who had walked into his shop on a February afternoon in a coat that cost more than his truck. And he thought he probably always would, because that was who she had been when he met her, and you didn't get to throw away who a person had been when you met them. That was part of loving them. That was the whole deal. Come inside, he said. In a minute. Okay. They sat on the step a while longer. Then they went inside and they turned off the porch light, and they went up the stairs, and he checked on his daughter, and she was fine, the way she had been fine for 3 years running, the way he had started to almost believe she was going to keep being, and he closed her door softly, and he went to bed with his wife in the room he had once not been able to walk into,
and the house settled around them the way a house does when it has finally, after a long time, decided to be a home. That was the end of it. That was the whole thing.